If I've learned anything from reviewing these handhelds is that you never know what you have until you have it in your hands. This is especially the case with the Powkiddy V10. This is a handheld that is uncharacteristically good. Like if you didn't tell me, I would never think this is a Powkiddy product. These handhelds continue to get better and cheaper every single time, and it makes no sense this handheld is so affordable. So in this video, we're going to be reviewing the Powkiddy V10, why I think it's actually relevant and maybe worth your consideration. Let's talk about it.
Play retro.
So let's start this review with an overview of the look and feel of the Powkiddy V10. So upon first glance, you'll notice the Powkiddy V10 is a bit wider than your average retro handheld. So just for size comparison, I do have here the Miyoo Mini Plus. This is another really popular retro handheld, and as you can see, if I put them side by side, it is a little bit stubbier than the Miyoo Mini Plus, and if I put them one on top of the other, you'll see the V10 is a bit wider than the Miyoo Mini Plus. Now this is something I actually appreciate. It does make the device look a little bit kind of weird looking, but at least they stylized it. They put a little LED light over here, you know, the big bezel, and it does look like kind of a chunky, kind of wide Game Boy. And in a market as saturated as this one, it's nice to see companies like this doing something different. This form factor is actually pretty comfy. As you can see, when I put my hand around the back, you'll see my finger just lands right here in the middle, so my hands don't really touch each other while I'm actually playing this thing, which is pretty cool. So I do like the form factor. One of my first impressions with this device, I was like kind of blown away by how it actually feels for a Powkiddy handheld. Usually Powkiddy don't have the best quality, but this plastic is actually really good. Like I was surprised by how soft it is and how great everything just feels. Even the triggers, they have a nice rounded kind of back, really ergo. The D-pad, completely untypical of Powkiddy, feels absolutely great. Even the action buttons, they're a little bit bigger than what you'd normally find on another retro handheld like the Miyoo Mini Plus. They're a little bit bigger and they're just more comfortable than what I've seen in other handhelds and even in Powkiddy themselves. So this handheld is actually quite different in a lot of ways. So really great controls and really great just build quality kind of plastic.
Play retro.
So while we're here, let me give you a quick tour of the handheld. For our screen, we have a 480 by 320 3:2 aspect ratio screen, perfect for pixel perfect for Game Boy Advance games. That's a 2x perfect scaling. Over on the bottom, we have a nice D-pad. We have a front-firing mono speaker, which gets very loud. We'll do a sound test shortly. We have action buttons in a Nintendo configuration. And we have a start and select over here. We also get minus and plus buttons. These are basically function buttons. We do also use the plus button to raise and lower the brightness. So as you can see here, you see the brightness changing. And this is also used to change the volume. This handheld does not have volume buttons. As we look on the top, no volume buttons, nothing on the sides, and no volume buttons on the back or the bottom either. So no buttons on the V10. That is a little bit awkward. You do have to use this button combination to adjust the volume, and sometimes that affects gameplay because you'll be in a game and your character will still move. So here I'm playing a little bit of Kirby, and let's say I want to adjust the volume. You can see Kirby is moving around even though I am adjusting the volume. So you'd probably want to pause or something and then do this, that way get back in the game. And it does take a lot of presses to get it to a high enough volume to be able to hear. To me, it's not the most serious thing, because how often are you really adjusting your volume? You know, you could just keep it at a level you like and you're probably not going to really adjust it that often. But for the times you are going to do it, it is a bit annoying to have to do a hotkey kind of button combination to change your volume.
But yeah guys, back to the device tour. Let's start with over on the top, we do have a DC. This is your charging port. So if we're looking at it from the front, this is your leftmost charging port over on the top. Then we have the OTG or on the go port. This is where you would plug in your Wi-Fi dongle if you have one of those like I have here. You just plug that right in right there. This is not included with your device, by the way. This is mine. I will leave a link in the description if you want a working Wi-Fi dongle for this console, because this does not have built-in Wi-Fi. For those of you wondering, we also have a reset button, which will reset the console, and your power button, which will obviously power on the device. Over on the back, L1, L2, R2, and R1. These are a bit clicky. That is what it is. Not too crazy, and they are a bit sensitive, so when you press them, this is not a console you want to like leave your fingers resting on the buttons. They are a bit sensitive and they will accidentally press. That's one thing I don't like about this device. You can't just leave your fingers on them. They kind of press by accident. Maybe I just have heavy fingers or something, but yeah. And then we also have an accessible battery compartment here with your 3000 milliamp hour battery. You can fit a bigger battery in here if you'd really like to, but yeah, that's just nice. And this cover is not the easiest thing to pull off. You kind of have to press really hard to pull it out, which is a good thing, you know, but it is a screwless design, so you can pull it out without any tools, which is awesome. Now over on the right side, we have nothing, just blank, which is nice. Over on the left hand side, we have nothing as well. And then finally on the bottom, we just have your 3.5 millimeter headphone jack if you want to use some headphones. And then we have the one SD card. So in here, as you can see, I'm just using a 32 gigabyte SD card. This is not the stock SD card. My philosophy with any of these retro handhelds is that they are what you make them. Put a little bit of effort into them, load them up with your own games, and flash your own software onto it, and you'll have a much better experience than what you're going to get out of the box. Even though out of the box they will work, the SD cards these come with are prone to failure, so I do recommend you get any one of these like SD cards and just load it up yourself. It's really not that difficult. Real cool thing about the Powkiddy V10, something Powkiddy's been doing for a while, is that you can actually turn it on without the SD card and it won't brick on you. So it says no SD card. It's so funny, but at least it tells you something. There's other consoles that will literally turn on and just stay on, and you can't turn them off unless you put an SD card and you press the reset button. So at least you have something from, you know, with Powkiddy, it tells you like, hey, you know, I don't have anything in here. I need something to work. So but yeah, that's pretty much the device tour. Now I know some people are going to complain about the size of the bezel here, and I want to explain why they went with this design, because they needed to keep a 3.5 inch screen, but they wanted to make the handheld wide. So that's why they went with a big bezel, because either they're going to make the screen bigger or they're going to make the device smaller. So in order to incorporate both of those factors, which was to make the device a little bit wider but to keep the same screen size, they have to put a large bezel around the device. So I personally don't mind it. I kind of like that it's stylized a little bit. Sorry about the fingerprints. But I understand why they went with this design, and it's not any different than using a Miyoo Mini Plus, because it's basically the same size screen. It's just, you know, has a surrounded with a bezel. But I know it's going to be a deal breaker for some people that don't like bezels like this. Some people say it defeats the purpose of having, you know, a perfectly scaled 3x2 aspect ratio screen, because it looks like you have black bars, which I get it. I totally get it. For those people, I don't think this device is for you.
Play retro.
So one of the downsides of the Powkiddy V10 is that the screen is basically only good for Game Boy Advance. For everything else, I'd say, guys, there are better handhelds for you. If you want to play SNES, Genesis, PlayStation 1, any of those things, yes, the Powkiddy V10 can play it, but the screen is not optimized for that form factor. For if you want to play those systems, I would highly suggest you consider a 4:3 aspect ratio screen, not a 3:2. This device excels in one area, and really one area only, and that is Game Boy Advance. So for those of you wanting to play everything and all in one device, this is not it, and I would not recommend it for those things. They're just better handhelds for that purpose. This handheld specifically excels at Game Boy Advance and is for Game Boy Advance enthusiasts. For those of you who know, there haven't been too many handhelds with this screen aspect ratio. There's only been about maybe 5 now, and they've been kind of expensive. Probably the cheapest one we could have gotten before was the RG351V. I'll put a picture on screen. That was about $90 retail. It's still around that price. So if you want something that's perfect for Game Boy Advance, this is the cheapest we've ever been able to get it. So yeah, this thing's only around like $45. Depending where you pick it up, some places you get a little bit less, some places you get a little bit more. The people who actually sent this to me, shout out my good friends over at Lit NXT, do sell this handheld, and I highly recommend you pick one up from them. They do have it in basically all the colorways, including my favorite colorway, the SNES kind of colorway. It is somewhere in the middle of like 40s, 45, 46, around there after the coupon or whatever. I'll try to leave something in the description below if you want to pick one up from them. But yeah, $45, you get a basically pixel perfect Game Boy Advance experience. And this is not something we were able to get at this price point for a long time. So I'm glad to see that these type of like very specific handhelds have reached this, you know, budget sector. Let's fire up some Game Boy Advance so you can see how great this screen actually looks. So here I have Metroid Zero Mission. I do have a nice little 3x LCD kind of shader on, and then I also have GBA Color Correction on, so it's basically as accurate as it could possibly get. But yeah, the camera really doesn't do it justice. The gaming experience you're gonna get on something like this just looks amazing. See how pixel perfect the Game Boy Advance looks on the Powkiddy V10.
Play retro.
I did want to talk about the software experience as well, because it is quite good. On the Powkiddy V10, we are running Arkos. This is a custom firmware. We get this experience right out of the box. I just applied like a new theme that you can just download. And yeah, this is the theme I've been going with. Here, let me show you my quick setup. So in my favorites list, I have sort of a grid view, like my top 10 games I want to play on this handheld. Right? We have a couple ports in here. Bunch of cool stuff, and I love having like a nice big box art for this, for my favorite games. And then I just have the whole Game Boy Advance catalog here with nice box art and a nice little description. And then if I wait a second, it'll show me a little video preview of what this game actually looks like, in case I'm not familiar with these games, but I am very familiar with the Game Boy Advance catalog. So yeah, super cool setup. I really like it. And this is probably what the theme I recommend for anybody wanting to use this device. So yeah, this is called Arc Full Solo Arkos. Okay, for anybody wondering what this theme is called, and you do have to configure it a little bit and change some of the menus yourself. I also have a port section because of course this handheld can play ports, so we're going to take advantage of that. We have a bunch of stuff in here. Most importantly, Shovel Knight, this game I've been playing a lot too.
Play retro.
So one problem I did find with this console, and probably its biggest problem, is actually the battery life indicator. As you can see, it says 0% battery. It's been like that basically since I've gotten it. Like, you can charge it, it'll go up to like 85 and won't go past 85 for whatever reason. So as you can see right here, it says 0% and it's still on. I've actually tested to see how long it'll last on 0%. I got it like maybe 45 minutes and it was still running. I just left the screensaver on like this and just let it do its thing. And this is something I really don't like about this console. It's like it gives me kind of like battery anxiety, because I don't know when it's gonna die because it doesn't tell me. There's also this little power LED light. Maybe this will turn red when it's actually low enough, but what it's reading right now is completely inaccurate. That's one problem with this handheld. So on top of that, when you actually plug this thing in DC, so plug that into DC, and now you'll see the light turns red. There's kind of this battery kind of charging indicator. The only problem is it never stops charging. Believe it or not, this thing never stops charging. It will never show a solid battery. The light never changes color. It just keeps going and keeps going. So I've kept this probably for like 3-4 hours. It continues. The reading does change. Like, this will go for like to like 4.1 volts, and then this will drop to like somewhere lower. So that's kind of my indication that it's kind of charged, but it doesn't really tell you like, hey, I'm fully charged, by telling you the light turns off or, you know, changing color. Nothing. It just kind of, I don't know. From what I've read online, when it goes to 4.1 volts, that's when it's fully charged. but that's not a proper way to do this. There should be some sort of software fix to get this correct, or at least like give you some sort of indicator. At least turn off the LED light to let you know, hey, I'm fully charged. But if you guys in the comments have a way to fix this, please let me know, or at least let me know what is the indication that it's fully charged, because that is probably like the single most annoying thing about this handheld, is just like the whole charging experience and like the battery anxiety you get with this thing. That being said, there's a couple things that I do like about the charging experience. This thing actually does support fast charging, believe it or not. So you can take a power brick like this with a USB-C to USB-C, and it will actually charge with this cable. And normally we don't get this on retro handhelds, so it's pretty cool that it's here. So here, let's unplug this one, and as you can see, it is still charging with the fast charger. So that is pretty cool. For some reason the current is a lot lower than it is on this one, but it's working. Another thing too is that we have an accessible battery compartment, which is always awesome. This 3000 milliamp hour battery does actually last the amount it tells you. So this is rated for 8 hours. I did actually get 8 hours playing on this battery, which is kind of crazy. So like on one hand, I'm not happy that you can't really tell when the device needs to be charged, but on the other hand, you don't really need to charge that often because the battery does last that long, which is pretty impressive for a device this size. As you can see, they did leave some space left over in the battery compartment just because of how wide this device is. They could have fit a bigger battery in here if they really wanted to, but that probably would have raised the price a little bit. So I'm okay with this setup. I've actually found a little kind of cool thing you can do with this. I put a little bit of some of this foam this comes with, and then I just took my Wi-Fi dongle that I used to, whenever I need Wi-Fi, I could just use this, and it's my little storage compartment for my Wi-Fi. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, it's pretty neat. You have a little space there for something. I use it for that, but you could probably keep like a second SD card or something, or whatever you like. I think this is probably the best case use because this device does not have Wi-Fi. So, you know, it does support a Wi-Fi dongle by putting it into the OTG port. And that's how you can see I have all this beautiful box art and videos and all sorts of Wi-Fi things because I have the Wi-Fi dongle. So just to demonstrate this, as soon as I plug it in up here, you'll see the Wi-Fi thing turn on. And as you can see, look, now the battery says 5%. It's just super inaccurate. But yeah, as soon as you plug in the Wi-Fi dongle, you will see the Wi-Fi turn on, and then you can do Wi-Fi things. Only thing I will say is that the Wi-Fi does drain a lot of battery, so use this sparingly. I'm actually happy this doesn't have Wi-Fi built in because of how much power it draws just to get signal and that sort of thing. For those of you interested, I will leave a link in the description to where I got this. I got this for like $1 and some change, and then this is like another $1. I bought like an 8-pack or something of these, and then I bought like 3 of these just to have them, and it works phenomenally. As you can see, I have all my box art scraped with videos and all sorts of things. That's how you also get ports, because it gives you the main files and then you add your own files later.
Play retro.
Okay guys, so here's my little notes list of my time with the V10, my pros and my cons, and let's just go over them one by one. As you can see, there's a lot of things I like about this handheld and not too many things I don't like about it. So for our pros, we have our 8-hour battery life. I was actually pretty blown away by how long this thing actually lasts. I was able to get through a good amount of Metroid Zero Mission without having to charge it at all. Like, I just kept playing. I just got tired of playing. I just put the thing down, and that's awesome. I love that about this handheld. It does actually last the advertised 8-hour battery life, so that's a big plus for me. The second one is perfect for Game Boy Advance, and that is kind of a pro and a con, which we'll get into. But if you're somebody you absolutely love Game Boy Advance, this is a great handheld to consider because it has the perfect screen for it, 2x integer scaling, and I'll give you guys my setup in the notes, the shader I applied and with the color correction and those sort of things. If you guys want a guide on how I set this up to be a Game Boy Advance only experience along with those ports, let me know in the comment section below and I'll see if I can put that together. I was actually going to make a video here for that. Next is the wide form factor. It is quite a comfy handheld, like just holding it. At first glance, you'd think it's not very comfy, but I actually really do like it. The whole shape of it, it's very ergonomic for a vertical handheld. It's kind of like a hybrid between a vertical and a horizontal, somewhere in between. That's why it's like this square. But yeah, really love the form factor here. Next is great build quality. I'm just really surprised by basically the plastics here they used, the controls, everything just kind of feels good, especially the plastic. It just doesn't feel like a Powkiddy device. That's kind of what I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Like if you didn't hand this to me and it didn't have a Powkiddy badge on it, I wouldn't think this is a Powkiddy handle, but it does feel surprisingly good for a Powkiddy product. Next is great controls. As I mentioned before, I love the controls here. I know there's no joystick, but that is perfect for what I'm looking for in this kind of setup. Something to play Game Boy Advance. You got a nice D-pad. It's nice and large and feels good, soft. They're quiet buttons. Great D-pad action buttons. They're in the correct configuration. They're nice and big and they feel good. They feel soft. Shoulder buttons feel good, with one caveat which we'll get to in our cons list, but I love the shape of them. They wrap around your fingers nice and they're just comfortable to use, so no complaints here. They also don't touch when you lay it down like this, which is awesome. Next is Arkos. I love the software experience here you get here with the Powkiddy V10. This is something that I just love about the older chipsets. We lost a lot of the great custom firmware we had before, so I'm kind of happy they returned to this chipset, the RK3326, because we lost Arkos. Arkos is amazing software, and I kind of wish we still had that on some of the newer devices like the H700s. If we had the Arkos on the H700s, those devices would be top tier, but unfortunately we don't have that. So to see Arkos on a device this price is just awesome. So that's a big major plus here for this. Performance, obviously this is the RK3326. We know what this can do. You can perform up to PS1 with some extra stuff. You can do a little bit of Dreamcast, a little bit of those higher end systems, but don't expect anything that beyond PS1 to perform perfect. Next is the price, between $40 and $50 depending when you get it. The price is right. The price is 100% right. I love the price here. Like I mentioned before, you can probably get this even on sale. I'm assuming this thing will drop down even lower in the near future when people don't pay attention to it. So let's hope for that. I mean, this video will probably maybe raise the price because this is a positive review, but the price is right. The price is right. Even at $40, even $50, I think this device is well worth the money. I've seen when this thing initially launched and there was no hype around it. I know a lot of people picked this up for like $25, and at $25 this is an absolute steal. But ever since there's been a few more reviews come out and it's been all pretty much positive, the price has kind of gone up. So normally I'm finding this thing for around $40 to $50 most of the time. Next is quick shutdown. That is a feature of Arkos. I will demonstrate that really quickly. So I'm done doing my little Kirby thing over here, you know, and I gotta go run some errands or something. So you just press plus the shutdown button, and that'll quickly shut down. It'll do a save state just like you can do on Onion. It just requires a button combo to do it, which is, you know, it's kind of a quirk of this device using hotkeys. But yeah, it works pretty well. And then when I turn it back on, you'll see a nice little boot logo. And give it a few seconds and it'll go right back into the game, right where I left off. So super cool feature and awesome feature that you should make note of. Please make note that you have to enable this in the settings for it to work. Okay, and just like you saw, you'll see here my game is running. Next is the loud front firing speaker. I like the placement of it. It's basically perfect. It is only one mono speaker, but I guess that's good enough for a device this size, and at least it's not in the corner where your fingers can block them or anything like that, and it does get quite loud. This is a big plus for me. And my last and final pro is Wi-Fi adapter support. As I demonstrated earlier in the video, we can plug in a Wi-Fi adapter to get Wi-Fi, and that's a feature of Arkos that it does support. So that is a big plus for me, Wi-Fi adapter support. So that's all my pros. Now let's move on to the cons. And as I mentioned before, the charging light / charging kind of experience with the battery percentage stuff. This is completely inaccurate, and probably the biggest con of this handheld, the fact that we don't know what the actual real battery percentage is kind of really annoying. So if somebody can find a fix for this, or maybe we can update with Arkos and it kind of fixes this thing. But I've noticed this is a common trend with Powkiddy devices, that the battery indicator is never correct. And then on top of that, you can't really tell when it's fully charged. It's just not the greatest battery experience. So that's a big negative for me, and something you do want to consider if you're considering picking this device up. Up next is the big bezel. The big bezel. I know this big bezel is gonna put some people off. For me, it doesn't really matter. I kind of like a retro styled kind of device with the bezel being this size, and it doesn't look that bad in my opinion. But I know there's gonna be some people that are not gonna like the big bezel, so I'm gonna list it as a con. Next is the screen is not the best. Why I said this is because basically the backlight is a little bit uneven. So maybe you can see it in this shot. Basically, I just made this note because the backlight of the panel is a little bit uneven in certain spots. That's common with these Powkiddy devices, and even for a handheld of this price point. It's not the biggest deal, but that's what I mean by screen is not the best. It's kind of a little bit of a nitpick. Next is no volume buttons. That's kind of a big deal for some people. For me, I don't think it's that awkward. You don't really adjust volume that much, but you do on this device. You don't have dedicated volume buttons. You do have to do a button combination, which is plus with left and right on the D-pad. Next, your 4x3 content is not the best. This device is not for 4x3 content. That means SNES, Genesis, PS1, Dreamcast, N64, any of that stuff that you want to play that's in a 4x3 aspect ratio, you're better suited on another device. Yes, this thing can play it, but it doesn't scale properly, and it's just not the best. There's better devices for that sort of content. If you want to play 4x3 content, I do not recommend the Powkiddy V10. This device is for Game Boy Advance and ports, in my opinion. And my last and final con is that the shoulder buttons are a bit sensitive. So what I mean by this is that sometimes you can, the pressure it takes to actually actuate these buttons is very low. So sometimes it creates an issue where you accidentally press them. So it's a small thing. You can probably get used to it pretty quickly, but it's not something that you want. This is not a handheld that you want to rest your hands on the back of the buttons, because you will accidentally press them. So that's a small con of the Powkiddy V10. So yeah, there's a lot to like here, but of course this device is a niche device. I think it makes a great stocking stuffer, a great gift idea, because it's so affordable. You know, you can buy a couple of them and just gift them, maybe load them up with some games, some Game Boy Advance stuff, and then hand it off to one of these kids and, you know, be done with it. But it's not a device I would recommend for somebody just trying to get one, because unless your favorite thing to play or emulate is Game Boy Advance, for the people wanting to get a one and done device, I don't think this is it, because there are better options for stuff that you may want to emulate, like SNES or PlayStation 1. You know, those 4x3 systems, 4x3 content is not going to look the best on this handheld. But that being said, it still can play those systems if you are okay with a compromised, sort of imperfect experience. And that's something you always get with these sort of handhelds. You get a pro, like you get a nicer screen for Game Boy Advance, but then the aspect ratio is wrong for something else. You can't get everything. You kind of make a trade. So just something to consider. Obviously, think about these pros and cons and whether or not they make sense for you, especially the charging issue this thing has. It may not be right for everybody. Lastly, I know there's a lot of you out there that just collect handhelds. I think this is a great collector's piece, but I don't think it's going to do anything that significantly different from what you probably already have. If you already own a bunch of these, you know, retro handhelds, it's not that much different. Despite its weird cons, I really like the Powkiddy V10. I actually don't want to move on from this handheld. I would like to just play it, because my favorite system to play is Game Boy Advance, so this handheld is basically made for me. But I know I can't do that, and I gotta move on to the next handheld. But for the money, for what it is, I really like the Powkiddy V10. And with that, that's gonna bring us to the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of the V10? Do you think it does anything differently enough that it warrants a purchase? Or is it just another handheld that's just a little bit different but does the same thing? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, thank you for watching. My name is Javi, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.